Welcome to Marketing Speak. I'm your host, Stefan Spencer, and today I'm very happy to have Jason Swenk with us. Jason has literally written the book for growing an agency from nothing to two eight-figure agencies. He's one of the most sought-after advisors to agencies in the world by showing them an eight-system framework that worked for growing his agency, working with brands like AT&T, Hitachi, Lotus Cars, and eventually led to selling his agency. Jason, it's so great to have you on the show.
Hey, man, thanks for having me on.
So first of all, I'd love to hear your origin story of how you got into the agency world and then how you were able to have, successful exits and how that all came about.
Sure. Well, it all started because one of my friends looked like Justin Timberlake. So back in '98, he looked just like Justin from NSYNC, and that's when NSYNC used to be really popular. And so I created a fake band, fake website called InShit, and then it got popular. And it was back when we used like GeoCity URLs because I didn't even buy a domain name for it. But then a lot of people started reaching out saying, "Hey, can you design a website for me? Can you do this?" And I was like, "Sure." And at the time, I was working for Arthur Andersen as a consultant there, and that's kind of how I started. And then we just kept growing it and getting bigger and bigger brands, and eventually working with Lotus Cars and Hitachi and LegalZoom, and you name a brand, we probably worked with them over the time, and then scaled it enough where got a lot of interest, kind of probably like you, where people wanted it, and then we sold it, and then I was like, I'm never like. At first, I was like, I'll never do an agency ever again. And then I was like, that's all I ever know how to do. And then I was waiting for my non-compete to run out. And as that happened, I had some old agency owners, friends reach out and said, "Hey, how'd you do this? How'd you do that?" And I started helping them out for free. And then put a podcast together called the Smart Agency Masterclass, and put a site together, just putting out a resource I wish I had. And that's kind of where we are today. And then I have another agency called Republics with a number of different smart people, working with us and running the show. And that's quickly grown from zero to a little over 20 million in a year. So it's
Wow.
pretty, all by accident.
Well, I'm sure there's no accident involved. I think it's kind of maybe divine intervention or coincidence, although I don't believe coincidences are actually coincidences. I do think that they are kind of divinely
Determination
guided.
I guess determination and stupidity, and a little bit of luck, I guess you can do it.
So you went from 0 to 20 million in a year. Like how? Give me the bullets on how you were able to achieve that. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Well, we started at 40 million. No, I'm just kidding. Usually when I see those ads, that's kind of what I want to put on the comment. No, we've been growing through acquisition. So we made 8 acquisitions of agencies and putting them together and just growing it up that way. So yeah, we haven't gone from, truthfully, it's not 0 to, 20 million just by doing services. It's taking all these agencies together and then rolling them up. And that's
Right.
how we were able to do it.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes a lot of sense, and I think that's a great strategy. Let's talk a little bit about roll-ups. Like, why would you do
Sure.
it? What are the benefits? What are the potential downsides?
Sure. We'll start with the downsides. And, this could happen, right? Like, let's say you put a bunch of companies together and the cultures don't match, or you're just looking at the numbers. Because at the end of the day, who cares about the top line revenue? That's what people want to hear. But at the end of the day, it's all about profit, and how profitable are you? And so you could put all these people together, and then if you can't get them in sync, then it's worth nothing. And then just you took all these good companies and then it just blows up. So that's kind of the disadvantage or the negative stuff that could happen. But on the advantage, right? Like if you look at, all right, well, how long did it take us to grow our first agency, to close to that? It took 12 years. And so you had to build it, you had to build everything, that way. And it takes a lot of learning and a lot of failure to do, and then you have to fit all these pieces. So some of the advantages, you can get to this level very quick, and you can grow, and then you can. A lot of times, if you look at businesses, specifically agencies, because that's the world I live in, they're probably only getting 20% of someone's budget that they could use. But if you could add a service or add a solution that complements what you're doing, maybe you can get 40% or 60%, or maybe you can get all of it, right? That's kind of what we're doing, at Republics. We want all that money, all that dollar, 100% of it, and just trying to do an end-to-end solution, for that. So it's just quicker to grow that way, but you have to have more layers in there. You have to have someone really good at finance. You have to have a really good onboarding. You have to be coaching and mentoring all the companies that come on. This might have happened to you. This happened to me when I sold the first agency. You come on real excited. You're like, wow, this really big company bought us. We have endless amounts of budget and resources at our disposal. And then you find out the real reason why they bought you, is just for the money, and they don't want you to do anything. And then you start getting demotivated, and you're like, this kind of sucks. So that usually can kind of happen. I see that happen a lot, honestly. So
yeah. So I had some golden handcuffs when I sold my agency, but I negotiated hard to get only a 6-month earnout, which is pretty unusual. So I was out as soon as the check cleared, essentially, after the 6 months. Yeah.
Well, I should have talked to you many, many years ago. I was at, my earnout, we had different deal structures, right? Like cash up front, which we did, salary, ownership, which we did, and then an earnout, which was a good portion. So we still did well, but I didn't see any of that earnout. And I tell people, it's usually designed for people to fail. So ours was for 2 years, or the event that we sold again, which they did, but they sold like right outside the window of, the special window. And then that meant nada.
That's so not cool. That's kind of
Well,
dirty.
we still did well, and what we learn, right? Like it's price of doing business. It's just education.
Yeah. So much education there. I remember, speaking of just outside the window, or just short of hitting a threshold. This wasn't for acquisition or anything. It was actually a performance-based deal with a client, a big name brand. I won't mention the name, but a big department store chain that we've all heard of. And they don't treat their vendors very well. I didn't really understand the full extent of that until later, but whatever, hindsight's 2020. We had an arrangement where we got some money, kind of monthly, but then there was a lot riding on hitting a certain number, and it was actually 500% of increase in organic traffic within this time period that we were working within, which was 6 months. And we were going to hit it. And then they screwed something up in the implementation. It wasn't our fault. It didn't get caught for a couple weeks. I guess, it could have been something that we could have caught, that they messed up the implementation, but it should have really been on their end. Anyways, so this was implemented right around Thanksgiving weekend, Black Friday, and it was screwed up. So that cost us the entire bonus. They paid us nothing. We got 450% increase in organic traffic instead of 500%, and they decided to pay us none of the bonus. So we fired the client, and they were flabbergasted. Nobody dared fire this company. Like, they couldn't believe it. I mean, just that was crazy. I mean, I just was.
I believe. Yeah, I believe Karma made a list and they're all on it.
Yeah, karma's real for sure. Anyway, so yeah, that was a learning lesson for sure. And I'm curious what sort of lessons you had that were painful, but in retrospect, really, really helpful.
Well, I mean, I don't know how long your show is. There's so many. I guess one of them, just the top of my head, and I think this applies to everyone, is just being so busy and not really charging enough is always a very important lesson. I always tell people, if you feel like you're too busy, or if, like, let's say, like, I mean, it looks like you coach people, right? So if you're coaching someone, they're like, I'm just too busy to execute on the great advice that you give. I'm like, well, how can we change that? And they were like, well, I don't have the money to bring in other people. And it's a telltale sign that you're not charging enough, and then if you're not charging enough, then you don't have that profit, and it's just kind of a roller coaster way. So I always tell people, kind of but in order to figure out the pricing, look at the value that you're delivering. Every quarter, sometimes it extends out to 6 months, depending on how busy we are, which, yes, we are raising our prices. We'll look at the value that our mastermind members are getting, or our one-on-one clients are getting, and we'll take that value and we'll average it out between the whole kit and caboodle, and then we'll divide it by 10, going, we want someone to be able to get 10x whatever. So if they give us $1, we want them to get $10 back, at least, at the minimum. And I think when I started doing that, it was easier to say a bigger number, right? So I remember one time at the agency, one of my project managers challenged me on what we were charging. So at the time, we were probably doing a website for maybe 150,000, just a regular public-facing website. So nothing too complex. And she goes, Jason, it only costs us like 11 grand to do this website. Why are you charging someone 150? How do you sleep at night? I'm like, I sleep really well. And then I had to explain to her the value that this client will be getting from the website that converts, and all the business that they're getting, which would be over $1 million. So I guess to answer your question, the pricing is something I lost. And then I guess one of the failures, and this might relate to some people too, in the service world, I remember having a prospect call me one time, and I remember just doing an amazing job on the sales call. Like, you just like, there's no way they're not going with me. So they invited us to their headquarters to pitch to them, which I don't like pitches either. That's a whole nother thing. But so we pitched to them, and I remember telling them the price of a website at the time. This was very early on. I think it was like 20 grand. That would have been our biggest website to date. And I remember them kind of laughing, and then they didn't go with us. And I remember going back to the office, and some of the employees were like, well, who'd you chat with? I was like, I don't know, some kind of hard name, like Brookshire. And they were like, Brookshire Hathaway? I'm like, yeah, that's it. And then my business partner at the time was like, here's their stock. Like, this is one of the biggest companies. Well, we lost it because we were too low. They were expecting 300 grand and above. We pitched 20K. So that's a real important lesson that I learned, that I think a lot of people could relate to.
Yeah, I could imagine Berkshire Hathaway laughing at that 20 grand price tag. So how often do you raise your prices? Is there a certain trigger that tells you, like, okay, it's time to raise our prices again?
It's really every 6 months, or let's say we're doing, let's say we set a limit, right? So let's say every 90 days we set a goal and say, all right, well, if we bring on 10 clients at this, the 11th client, we're going to raise our price. So it's basically supply and demand. I was interviewing Seth Godin on the podcast maybe about 6 months ago, or maybe a year ago, I don't know. I lose track of time. And I asked him, I said, what's an agency you really admire and respect? And he started describing this one agency. I go, well, what do you respect about them? He goes, well, they know they never want to be over 50 people. And if they're at 50 people, they can't take on more than 100 clients. And so they capped it off. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And so like let's say you're going up to that limit and you're saying, all right, the first 20 is going to be at X. Then maybe you're in really supply and demand. Well, you double the prices. See if someone will pay it. If they don't, back it down a little bit, or find the right audience that will actually pay that, as long as there's a value there. And I always look at things of going, what's the value and what's the expectation? And obviously with the Berkshire Hathaway, their expectation was way above the value that we would have delivered or anybody would deliver. So it's kind of a happy medium, but you have to ask the right questions in order to figure that all out.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I kind of missed the boat since I haven't raised my prices in like 8 years, 9 years.
Oh, God, yes. Oh, yeah. Yes. That boat sailed, but you can hopefully make a little dinghy to catch up to the boat.
Yeah, that's funny. Okay. Let's circle back and talk about pitches. What do you not like about pitches, and how do you get out of doing pitches?
Well, pitches are you're giving away your best stuff for free. They're getting the strategy. They're getting your all your intellectual property that you've built up over the years for free, and then they're paying you for execution. And I think that's wrong. What I like to do, and when we started getting smart, we started thinking about, well, how do we get out of the pitches? So I remember one time Lotus Cars came to us and they said, hey, we got this new four-door car called the Evora coming out, and we want you to pitch us on how you could help us to do this microsite. So every agency was leading with the pitch and all this kind of stuff. And we said, we're going to do this a little different. We're literally going to say, well, we're not going to respond to your RFP. We're not going to pitch to you, but here's what we're going to do. We would like to meet with you for 2 hours, ask you a ton of questions, start putting models together of, once we have the understanding of what you really want, model that together and come up with a blueprint, a success blueprint for launching this four-door car called the Evora. And we said, we're going to do it. We're going to lose money on it, but we're going to do it for $2,500. And I would tell them, I said, look, and this is guaranteed. This is the only guarantee I would ever give outside of another guarantee that we'll talk about in a second. I said, look, you'll either love the plan, you'll go execute it yourself. You'll love the plan, you want our help, which is the most common, or you'll hate the plan, we'll give your money back, so there's nothing for you to lose. Well, they were like, heck yeah, like there's no long decision. There's no risk for them. So they can, like, immediately we could start working with them, and we're getting paid. So we immediately elevated ourselves to that advisor role, right? To think of like in a movie like Batman, right? There's Batman, right? And we all want to be Batman, but there only can be one Batman. So if I make myself Batman, that makes the client Robin. No one dresses up as Robin. What you need to do is you need to position yourself as Alfred. He controls Batman. And so we were able to elevate ourselves to Alfred. And then from that, they liked the plan, obviously. And what we realized was when someone would pay you, they're 20 times more likely to pay you again if they have a good experience. So from that, we were able to, do that, and then even get them what that project looked like to build the whole plan before everybody else was even able to pitch or get them the proposals or any of that. So we learned that lesson very quick. So if you can think about how can you slice off part of your offer into like what I call the foot in the door offer and just help them out, you can get away from giving pitches away for free and actually get paid to do your proposal.
Gotcha. Do you actually like or dislike receiving RFPs?
Do you know the two winners of every RFP is? Do you know what that is?
No.
Okay. The one that wins it and the first one out. RFPs, can we cuss on this show? Or
Well, we'll bleep it out. That's fine.
Okay. RFP stand for, well, I'll tell you the nice version. Request for punishment, real effing problem. There's a number of different of what I mean to RFPs. So whenever people come to me for an RFP, I would always say, look, thank you for coming to us, but we're going to decline. But if you'd like our help, then I would pitch the foot in the door. Now, what would happen? They'd be like, what? Like someone's like you fired that client. What? You can't turn us down. They'll want you more. And then initially they'll say, okay. And then their boss will be like, no, you need to get those guys to come in. Why are they turning it down? And I'd be like, exactly. Why are people doing it for free? Why are we charging for it? And we usually win it. The only times that we did make exceptions is if we could write the RFP. I mean, that's who usually wins it.
Gotcha. So how do you get into the place of writing the RFP?
Got to be authority and build relationships, right? And that really stems from, what I found is really niching down and being that authority in your space. You have to understand your space. You can't just say, I help anybody that lives and breathes and will give me money. And it takes time and consistency. Like for my business now, we've built a huge moat around ourselves for helping agency owners, the ones that we want from doing the podcast. Like we have 2,000 pieces of macro content out in the world versus, most people you see on the Facebook ads have a landing page. Here's the secret bullet. Here's the silver bullet in order to do X, Y, and Z, right? So it's about consistency, showing up, creating that content for an audience that you really understand, that they can resonate with you and really that you can empathize with, you can show a little bit of authority with, and then you could say, look, I know you want this, but you're probably here and you're feeling this way. So you can really connect with them on a way that you're not going to connect, they're not going to connect with other people on.
Gotcha. And if you could advise an agency who's charging, let's say, in a way that's not effective or highly profitable, whatever that model is, whether it's hourly or it's a set monthly retainer, it's performance based, whatever it is, and you want to overhaul their pricing model, how would you do that?
Well, you'd first start looking at what's the value that they deliver, right? Kind of like what I told you about, because you need to know kind of the baseline. And then you need to figure out kind of like, what do I want to make personally, right? Like I like to start kind of personally because that's the why. If you just want to build an 8-figure agency, I think that's kind of stupid.
Okay. Well, why is
right?
that?
Like,
why is that?
Well, but if you start out there, if you have a good reason, if you say, I want to build an 8-figure agency so I can make over $1 million a year and then have the option to sell it for 40 million, right? Like you have a number in your head and you tie that back to your personal goals, then I say go for it. But most people if they go, I want to create an 8-figure agency just to ring that bell, they don't understand all the things that they have to go through. Like you're going to get really bloody. Like you have to have passion behind this. There has to be a reason or you're going to quit. Or you get to a point where you're like, screw it, I'm just going to sell it. Or screw it, I'll just close it up, right? Or I'll fire everybody. I just got off an interview where agency owner just came in one day and fired everybody just because he could. But they were at a breaking point because they didn't have that why behind them, right? Like if you find out, like for example, before I had clarity at our agency or even in this particular business the coaching business, I didn't have clarity of like, I just would be like, all right, get over 7 figures, coaching business. All right. Well, why do I want to do that? That doesn't help anybody outside of me. And who cares about it? But if I could say, because one of the things when I sold solar, I lost that significance. I was actually depressed when I sold because I didn't have that sense of contribution or community or that significance out there. I said, my why this time is really to be a resource I wish I had and to be able to show people how they can set up the right systems to create that freedom so they can pick and choose, so they can take off in the summer if they want, or they can take off a weekend a month or whatever it is, whatever their goals are to achieve, because then that's the real power in order to grow it. And then so start with yourself and then start with what does the agency need to do in order for you to get that? And then figure out, all the other stuff kind of just, steamrolling from there.
So I'm curious, what is your why, and how did you find that out?
It just takes time. Like I said, our why is creating a resource I wish I had when I was running the first agency.
So
And how it's like,
before we go any
mhm,
any further on that, I want to dig a little deeper because I think there's a why
sure.
behind that why. What do you think that
hmm
might be?
Being significant. Um, contributing what I've learned, taking the pain and the pain and the all the crap and turning it into good. Um, you know, I get great reward from seeing our clients, kind of graduate. Like I had working with this one client for 6 years, and they're at a point now where they're transitioning to the chairman, and he didn't have to do anything in his agency anymore. He literally can walk away, and he just keeps getting a really big paycheck, and then he can go do his other ventures that he wants, creating other businesses, because we're all always going to be working, right? The real people are always needing to build stuff. There's never any retirement, whatever we do. So
Gotcha. Okay. And so you got depressed and lost your significance. You found your way back. What was it that
mhm.
uh, woke you up to the fact that you had depression?
I just was just sitting around. I like there's only all your friends are working. It's your kids are at school. You just don't have and back then I used to relate myself to just work rather than being, I rate myself now as, first, father, a husband, and that kind of stuff rather than, yeah, I have a couple businesses, and then I'm a businessman. Like that's kind of secondary. The family is the why, so we can go out to, before we moved out to Colorado, like, so we could go out there for the summer and take off. It's like all these other things just contributed to that.
Gotcha. Okay. So do you have a kind of a case study example of an agency that you worked with and you took them from X to Y in a certain time period and they implemented certain strategies and tactics that you laid out for them and
hmm
maybe they hit some bumps in the road on the way?
yeah. I mean, one that I'm thinking about now is I remember him coming to me, and I remember very vividly. He goes, "I don't know if I have enough money to pay you. I'm at around 400,000 in revenue, and we're just kind of squeaking by." And I said, I never say this anymore, just because I don't ever want to like push anybody into it. But I said, look, whatever money you give to me, I promise you, we'll turn it around. You'll make 10x without a doubt. And he goes, okay. I don't know what compelled me to kind of say that, because usually my sales process, I'm not selling. I'm just like literally like, do you want help? Here's kind of what I'm thinking, and that's really it. But for some reason, I pushed him, and about 6 months, we were just kind of going through and building the right systems and really showing him, looking at the gaps that they're not able to see. And I said, look, if you really want to lead this agency, there's 5 roles that you need to kind of become, because right now you're the owner, you're the doer, you're the executor, you're not delegating anything. Everything's going through you. You're the toll booth. I said, the goal is to get you to 5 roles. I want you to set the vision and communicate it to your team. And that will give them the power in order for them to make a decision without going through you. So now you have a little bit more time. The other is you have to coach and mentor your team so you can make them better, both personally and both in the business. The third is being the face of the organization. You got to get out there. You got to build the relationships. You got to do the videos or the webinars or whatever, you speaking on stage, whatever makes you comfortable in order to reach your audience. The other is understand financials, and the last is assist sales. I said, when you're able to achieve that, you'll know, because you don't, like, we're thinking as we're building, we have to do everything ourselves. We have to set up all the system. We have to literally do everything. But you get to a point where you can literally start, um, scaling, right? And you just get to a whole different point. Like I look at it as, let's say, like 4 stages. Like the first stage, right? You're just existing, and you're the driver, right? Like think about like a car, okay? You're or like a race team. So you're the driver and you're just existing. But really, what you need is you need that clarity so you can give that to the other people. And then the next stage is you're in survival, right? You start hiring people. You're this car that you're building, and growth can really only be achieved, through direction. Like, what's the direction we're going? What are the different systems that we need to set up? So we started going through, all right, how are we attracting clients? How are we converting? How are we delivering it to them? How are we streamlining operations so we can have scale? And then you get to this next stage is, all right, we're ready to race. Like we have a driver, we have a car, and now we have an engine. But we need to, like, I used to race cars, and whenever we're going down the straightaway, we need to check our gauges, which, like you're looking down, how hot is the oil temperature? Do we have gas? I've run out of gas on the racetrack before too. It's stupid. I forgot to put gas in it and I didn't check the gauges. And obviously I lost that race. But like when you're in this ready to race phase, growth can be achieved through delegation. And you can, right? And so you're looking at all this. And then the last part is like your pit crew, right? You're in this winning stage where everything is aligning up. So you have that alignment between your team. You have the right A players, you have the right core values, you have the right management, you have the right accountability in place. And now you can scale as fast as you want. And so we've done that for a number of different agencies. The one I'm thinking about, he went from 300,000 in revenue, and then today he's well over the 8-figure mark. He as well is about to step out of his agency, but we've had other ones that have sold for more money than they've ever thought about, just because they've set up the right systems and hired the right team, just so they can make sure they have the right race team.
Yeah. So this guy went from 300,000 to 8 figures in revenue, and over what time frame?
6 years.
Okay. What was the fastest run up from kind of small agency to a big one, or to an exit?
Probably, well, Ralph, he still has it. I think it was about a year and a half. I went from a little under $1 million to, I think today there may be 15 million in revenue. That's when I think about, that's the other thing that, we've worked with so many people over the years. I actually have a team, and this probably would help everybody out as well, especially when you're pricing. A buddy of mine showed me this about 3 weeks ago. We did a retreat in the mountains, and he goes, "You need to build an arsenal of all the stories of success." I said, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, Jason, like, you've probably forgotten so many that you've done about where they were, what it was like, all that kind of stuff." And I said, "You're exactly right." So we actually have one person on our marketing team right now going through and building an arsenal of all our success stories. So then we can actually look back and we can recall them, and they just tell their story, because people relate to stories rather than, kind of telling you.
Yeah. As they say, facts tell, stories sell.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so you talked about delegation being an important piece of the scaling model that you have. I'll give you an example. It's very close to me because it is actually me. I'm my own bottleneck in the sales department. I'm the only one selling. So I'm curious, what would you advise somebody like myself to get out of that bottleneck and to be able to delegate more, and to not just end up losing a lot of opportunity in the process as well?
Well, why haven't you hired someone already?
Well, I'm very good at it, and I have just hired a COO, and so that was a big load off. I don't know that I'm ready to onboard a VP of sales so quickly after just hiring a COO, and also last month I hired an EA, an executive assistant. So yeah, I don't know. I guess I could, but I'm thinking I should probably successfully onboard my COO and make sure everything is kind of stable and the dust is settled before hiring anybody else.
Well, I think the what's messing you up is the thing between your ears. Honestly, like we all think we're going to be the best. No one can do it better than us, and that's plain wrong. If you hire the right person, like I always prided myself in our company of being the dumbest person. That's my goal. Like I don't want to be the smartest person, then I'm leading a bunch of idiots. So but maybe what would make you more comfortable, I think if you put maybe a process in place, maybe to delegate just them doing like the first call, just the qualification call, and setting that up to the next part. Because look, if you're doing the sales for everything right now, it's kind of think about this analogy that my buddy Ian uses. Um, let's say you go to the doctor and you get to park your car and the valet's there and it's the doctor and he goes park your car. And then he opens the door for you. He walks you in. He gets you the paperwork. He takes in your health stuff. He sets your next appointment. And then, he checks your oil. He checks your blood work, all that kind of stuff. And then he tells you what you need to do. Like it's all one. You're going to be like, dude, why are you doing everything? Versus having the valet, having the nurse, the office manager, the office managers. There's different perception where you're going to have much more authority, coming to this person with the prescription versus them doing everything. And so
That's a
when
great
people
point.
start realizing that, then they go, oh, I want to build more authority. Like I can't be doing like all this. Like you have to kind of start separating yourself. I mean, that's kind of what we're starting to do in ours of going, I'm in the same point. But I put people through so many different forms and in order to get to me that most of the time when I show up, it helps. But a lot of times I like to kind of say, let's put some layers. So then when you actually chat with that person, it's such great authority. Like, because you have the bat phone doesn't mean you're going to reach Batman. You're probably going to reach someone else. You're going to reach Batman's secretary. So if but when you have the ability to chat with Batman, and you're going to take that more serious, which are going to make your sales go up, which will also give you more time, right? Like, do you really want to talk to everyone and try to qualify them yourself? Like, wouldn't you like to have the perfect leads all set up and then you just come in? That's what we did at our agency. I would just add color. I'd just be like, yeah, that looks good. So
Yep.
that's how I look at it.
Okay. Good. So how did you get your first big client when you got started?
First big one was by accident, if I think about it. I think I knew someone and they came to us. But what I've coached people is, doing what we're doing is one of the best things in order to get clients. Um, Honestly, so invite them on your podcast. So if I was going after, say, a particular niche, hospitality space, okay, and I had a hospitality podcast, I would, and I've actually had this person on my show. He used to work for IHG, International Hotel Group, and Del Ross, that was his name. He doesn't work there anymore, guys, so don't go calling him. But I would go, hey, Del, I have this hospitality podcast, and we feature expert leaders in the industry. Would you like to come on and tell your story? Hell yeah, of course. So you come on, you have a conversation, you talk about stories, and then at the end, they're probably going to be like, hey, tell me more about this. Like on our podcast, at the very end, I always go, hey, thanks so much, Stefan, for coming on the podcast. If you enjoyed this and you want to be surrounded by amazing agency owners on a consistent basis, make sure you go to digitalagencyelite.com. Boom, 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 right? And then what happens whenever I wrap up and I hit end recording, we have a little chat afterwards. I never take the interview up to the max. And they were like, hey, tell me more about the mastermind you have for agencies. I'm like, oh, cool. Right? Here it is. Here's what I got. Yeah. And they usually become a member, right? So like you can do that. That's a really easy way. Or I remember if you go to jasonswenk.com/4, this is Del Ross's interview. I said, how many agencies are calling you on a consistent basis? Like, oh, it's overwhelming. They just want to take me to lunch or dinner or golf. I go, well, what works for a small company to get in with IHG? He goes, just call me up with something that's new. I'd be like, hey, have you heard of X for your industry? Do you have 5 minutes? I'll tell you about it. And if he hasn't, great. They had at the time, I think, $80,000 of play money that they would test out little agencies. It's about that foot in the door. Get your foot in the door, and then just walking up the ladder for all your other services in order to get those bigger brands.
Gotcha. Okay. Have you ever done a project for free in order to get a testimonial from one of the bigger brands?
No.
Okay. That was the way that we got started when we switched from just doing web development with SEO baked in to doing SEO consulting for some bigger companies that didn't want websites developed. They already had an in-house team. Yeah, so we did a free SEO audit for Target.com in exchange for a testimonial. That was actually quite a successful strategy.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, you got to be careful and make sure. I mean, it comes down to the qualification. Like, can they actually make a decision afterwards, and are we building it? But yeah, we just always stemmed away from it. But like I said, I tell everybody there's millions of strategies out there, and you have to find the right one for you.
Yeah, and I think you alluded to this earlier that it's really about mindset, like what's between your two ears. That's the make or break sort of thing in your business and your life, and the strategies and the tactics, they're helpful. But if you don't have your mindset right, nothing's going to work.
Correct.
Yeah,
it's amazing how you self-sabotage yourself. I mean, I remember getting to a point where we were getting tons of business, and I didn't feel at the time we could support it. So I would like sabotage it. Like I'd sabotage the sales. Just because I didn't feel that all the pieces were correct. It was kind of like, in Days of Thunder, Cole Trickle's nervous in the car and he needs to get out of that car and he just pegs the accelerator and the engine blows up because he couldn't wait to get out of the car. I really feel that a lot of us have done that in the past.
Gotcha. Okay. So I'm curious, did you work on your mindset by going to some motivational speaker like Tony Robbins or something, or did you read a book, or how did you make the big breakthroughs in mindset?
It's funny that you ask. So I did go to, like, I always followed Tony Robbins. I was one of the ones that got his CDs back in the mid 90s, right? And then I remember after I sold the agency, I went to one of those firewalk things that they do, like they do on the first day. And they walked on fire. And I was like, oh, this is bullshit. And like I walked across. And I remember like a couple months later on the news, like people got burned by walking on fire. And I was like, holy shit, that's real. And I was like, oh, that's cool. But, when after I sold the agency, I went to his event and I learned kind of like what the 7 basic traits that he teaches that we all need, but we give ranking to 2 of them, which is different for everybody. And mine was significance, which I rank really a lot. And that's kind of when I was like, oh, let's kind of go into this business. But most, like I was telling you in the very beginning, a lot of it was accidental with really everything, but it was just being consistent, hardworking, a little bit of arrogance because you don't know, like you're young and I still feel like I'm young, even though I think I'm 39 for the fifth time. Um, um,
How does that
right.
work?
You just, you're determined not to turn 40. So,
Funny. And do you do other Tony Robbins events, or did you join his platinum partnership? Nope.
no, I love Tony, but I didn't like the event, just because of the hugginess and I literally I left after the day and a half. It just wasn't for me. But I liked his message and all that kind of stuff. But no, it was just I just the first day was really powerful. I suggest everybody going to at least the first day because you can kind of map out what you want your life to be, and really start with your time goal, and then the time goal is the rule. Like you don't break that. Like I take off in the summers. I don't work on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. I don't work after 3. So those are rules that I never break, and that's a goal I have every quarter. Um, and then you create the revenue goal, but you have to figure out why. Why do you want that going back, right? And then you have a create goal. Like, what do you need to create in order to be able to achieve that? So,
Very cool. Yeah. I've done a lot of Tony Robbins events myself. Changed my life. I am literally unrecognizable from the previous version of myself before doing the firewalk. Did that in 2009, and people
good.
will see that photo. I'll show somebody a photo from prior to 2009 and say, "Oh my God, you look older there than you do now by a long shot." I'm like, "Yep, I know."
Very good.
Yeah, but then the spiritual breakthroughs and awakenings that I got from being a platinum partner were life-changing. And then, of course, I met my wife through Tony Robbins as well, and met
Most
her at
important
Dating with
one.
Destiny. Yeah, yeah,
Very good.
yeah. So I got one more question for you. Do you recommend that an agency owner create some sort of information product, or maybe write a book as a way to either give back or to build their authority positioning?
I mean, books always help with authority, but I think it's more about creating a podcast. Honestly, I think that has more reach than anything else that you can do. Books kind of come and go and they die, for most, right? But a podcast lives on, and you can constantly keep adapting it. Like I think that's the easiest way to build authority. Honestly, it checks
Yeah.
every single box out there. So
And a
I
book is a lot of work. And
it
keeping it
is.
updated. I know from
Yeah.
experience, because I've got this
Yeah.
this
I mean,
beast here that I got to keep updating. I like what this thing.
yeah, and yours, like you have to update that all the time because SEO changes all the time, right? Like it's nice about, our book, the accelerating your agency, like it's foundational systems that will stand the test of time. So we never have to update it, which is nice because I hate reading a book or writing a book or any of that. I just remember someone was like, you need to build more authority, write a book. And I think that's, for me, it was a mistake to think that because I can reach people a lot longer with videos and podcasting and that kind of stuff. But some people are better at writing, so a book is perfect for them. I'm not the best writer. Like I'm uh, I'm bilingual. I have good English and bad English.
I got it. Okay, cool. And yeah, so how do our listeners reach you, work with you, learn from you? Like, what's the next step that you would,
Yeah,
where would you send them to?
best way to get in contact with us or just check out the 2,000 pieces of free content out there is just go to jasonswenk.com. Swenk is spelled Swenk, so jasonswenk.com, and go there, check it out, say hello, and yeah, reach out to us click on contact, and you'll go through and chat with our little Don Draper bot. And then it actually goes to me after 2 questions, and then just say, hey, I checked you out on this podcast and enjoyed it, and I'll be like, great, that's all we want.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Jason. Appreciate
Definitely.
it.
Thanks for having me.